Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Tonight I've got a couple of quick project updates for you, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you guys again. Last week we had a really good conversation, or a good bunch of conversations going on all things yarn and crochet, and so I'm hoping if you guys have more questions about yarn or crochet topics or whatever you guys want to talk about, you can put those in the live chat and we'll just start talking about those as they come in. Otherwise, I have a couple of projects that I've been working on, and I'm going to share those with you. Welcome to everybody in the chat. Thank you for joining me tonight. Looks like a handful of people are saying hello, and thank you for joining us, and I'm glad you're all here. And like I said, anybody who's new to the channel or new to the live stream, just throw any questions that you have about yarn or crochet or whatnot into the chat, and I'll just kind of talk about those as they come through. So yeah, looks like quite a few people saying hello. So welcome everybody. So last week I showed this shawl. This is the Moonwake shawl from Rachel Newen Designs, and I was partway through it, and so I just want to show the whole thing tonight. It's kind of a cool pattern. It's not a difficult pattern, but it does require a lot of paying attention to your color changes. It's worked in pairs of rows. So you work this way, and then you work this way again, and then you turn and work both colors back. So it's a really interesting design on the shawl. And so you can work the two colors together and not have to change colors very often. So you can see for as many color changes as I have, I really only have a couple of tails on the edge to sew in. And if I had worked over my tails, I wouldn't have any to sew in. It does need to be blocked still. It's not going to change substantially when it's blocked. The edges will straighten out a little bit, but really, because it's such a solid shawl, it's really not going to change a whole lot. I have a shawl on tonight, but when I put this one on, you can see it's kind of cool because the majority of it is this speckled color over here. But the like solids kind of make this like nice swoop over here. And then this piece just needs to be shawl pinned basically right there. And it'll wear really nice, I think. I picked these colors. So I've had this little mini skein set for a long time. Actually, it was funny because I get an update on my phone basically every day from the photo service that I use, showing me pictures that I took a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, however long. I think back up to 8 years ago. I've been using the same like photo upload thing. And so it shows me pictures that I've taken over time. And it was funny because I had gotten this mini skein set as part of a gift exchange, like a yarn exchange with my Discord group. And while I was working on this shawl, I think the 2-year anniversary of when I had gotten it, 2 or 3 year anniversary, rolled around. So I've had it for quite a while, and I just couldn't find the right project for it. And so this shawl was in testing, and so I decided to use it. And then I had this yarn from Expression Fiber Arts, and the colors in this pink with all these speckles matched really well with some of the colors in here. And it just feels like a really nice, like muted spring shawl. So that's kind of what I was going for here. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Let's see. Norma's got a question about crocheted edges, which I will get to in just 1 second. Isaiah's asking what pattern. This is the Moonwake shawl by Rachel Newen Designs. It is a paid pattern, but it I think is worth it. I don't personally mind paying for patterns as long as they're well written and I think It's worth it to me to not have to like do the math to figure out how to do the increases. And, you know, people will reverse engineer patterns just from pictures. And to me, it's not worth the effort. It's a couple of dollars and it goes to a designer and then I don't have to do the extra work there. I can just enjoy the crochet. But yeah, Moonwake Shawl by Rachel Nguyen Designs. All right, Norma asked, when she's crocheting, her edges are uneven. How do I get straight edges? So the biggest trick that I've learned is to stop doing starting chains. So normally when you turn and have to do a new edge, you have to chain up to the right height, and then you make your stitch. And what you can do is chainless turning options. There's like 3 or 4 different options. The one that I like are usually referred to as standing double crochet or standing half double crochet. You can do a standing triple crochet. It's not super easy, but it's doable. But basically what you do is you draw up a loop to the height of your stitch, and then you use your thumb and sort of hold it and drop your hook down and behind it, yarn over like normal, and draw under the loop, which acts as like your draw through 2. Yarn over again, and you draw through 2. And I know that sounds very confusing, but Moogly Blog actually has one of the best tutorials on this process. She's got a really extensive collection of different chainless foundations or chainless turning stitches. So I would start there and look and see. I don't know if we ever did the chainless turn as its own.
You have a chainless starting double crochet / standing double crochet video.
Oh, I do have one? I didn't think we ever published it. Okay. Apparently.
Funny that you were saying to watch that.
Yeah, apparently I have my own video. My husband's shaking his head at me because I have my own video that I can direct you to. I did not think we published it. So that's on me. But yeah, so the link there to my video is in the chat. I don't tell you there. Sorry. But that should give you, that's what I do on my edges, and you can see the edge when we flip back to the other camera here. The edge along here is very smooth and very straight, even without having been blocked or without having blocked it. You can see, I gotta push it forward. The edge is really nice and clean and straight. Sorry, we're gonna focus it a little bit more.
Well,
yeah. Sorry. So you can see there that edge is really nice and straight, and that's what I do on my edges is a chainless turning or a standing double crochet. So, other than that, if that ends up being, it's a little bit tricky to learn and it takes a little bit of time, but I think that's absolutely worth it. There's no getting around the little starting chain on single crochet, but that generally doesn't matter nearly as much. And the procedure for half double crochet and double crochet are the same for a chainless stitch. You just make the stitch taller, basically, when you do the turning chain. For a double crochet, you make it a little bit taller than a half double crochet. So, yeah, hopefully that helps, but that's what I do, and that really gives me nice, clean edges. Oh, so the pattern that I'm wearing is, it's a Rachel Nguyen Designs pattern, but I'm trying to remember what it's called. The yarn on this is Sueño by Haiku, which is a pretty nice yarn. I'll lay this out. I think the name of this color is Aegean, which is like a sea type of color. And so I cannot remember the name of this pattern. I can pull my laptop out though, and I've got it set up to show on screen, and I could probably find it really quick. I feel like it's called something like Falling Leaves, but I could be off base on that. The other problem is that sometimes I will test patterns before they're released, and so they're tested under a name that then changes. So sometimes I remember the test name, but not the released name. But I will pull my laptop out and show you guys the pattern, and we can look up the name on this. But this is one I made a while back. It's an asymmetric triangle shawl, and I think it's done in a DK weight, which I think is what Sueño is. But it's pretty nice yarn. It's got a really nice amount of squish. Let's see if I can pull this up. Let's see. Yeah, Craft Caitlin says she loves standing stitches. It's so easy once you get it. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time just to figure out how to make that motion, but once you've got it, it's as easy as any other stitch. And Helen, no problem for having me take it off. It's just easier to show them once they're laid out so you can see the pattern a little bit better. For some reason, I don't seem to have much in the way of internet. There it goes. All right, hold on one second. Looks like it just kicked me out of Ravelry. That's all that was wrong. Let's find Rachel's. You guys can see what I'm doing here. I don't want the group. I want the designer. There it is. It's right there. It is called Sleeping Willow. And it looks like there is a number of different options. There's a wrap, a shawl. The shawl is what I'm wearing. The wrap, I believe, is rectangular, more like a stole. There's a scarf and gloves and a hat, all that are out of the same pattern. So, actually, there's mine right there. So, top of the page. So, anyway, that's, oh, I don't actually need to close Ravelry. I could just leave that open. The other thing that I've got to show tonight, let me move this back off screen here, is a cowl that I've been working on over the last week that I really can't tell you how much I love. It was frustrating to start, but it has been just like one of the nicest, like prettiest things that I've made in a really long time, I feel like. Yeah. So this is the pattern, and so it's mostly just V-stitches worked, but it's a reversible pattern. So if I turn this inside out, you can see, it's basically two V-stitch lattices worked into each other. It's pretty complicated to get started and a little bit confusing to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. Once you're 5-6 rows in, it really is very cool to work up, and I don't know, I just really love it. So I've been really happy with how this is working up. I've got a ball of Melbrigo Machita, which is a single ply yarn. It's what their pattern called for. It's 100% merino superwash, 100-gram ball, 420 yards. It's fingering weight yarn. And then the other yarn, so I think it was supposed to be Machita and their other sock yarn, which I can't think of the name of it. But I had this ball from Sun Valley Fibers, I believe. Yeah, Sun Valley Fibers in the color Ambassador. And it is 80% merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. And it's just so soft and silky. And I'm just really, really happy with how this is turning out. So I hope it looks as cool on screen as it does in person. But what you can't really see is because it's this dual layer. You can see how there's the two layers, and then you work across them on the next row. Because it's this dual layer, it has just like the most amazing amount of like squish to it. It's really, really going to be a pretty cowl once I'm done with it. I imagine this is a pattern that I'm going to repeat a couple of times until I'm sick of it. So I don't know. This is really, really one that I'm very excited about. So, okay. Last week I mentioned my favorite yarn. So we talked about a couple of different yarns. Probably my two favorites are a yarn, at least a yarn company, called Twisted Fiber Arts. They're a pretty expensive gradient yarn company, but they really make some of the nicest, softest, just most stunning yarns. And then the other was Fiber Optic yarns. They also make gradient yarns, but they uniquely make a beginning and end yarn. So normally when you have a gradient, it's just the gradient, the 4 or 5 colors that transition over a period of time very slowly. What Fiber Optic yarns offers is you can get an additional skein of either the start or the end color, which obviously is, either end can be start or finish, but you can get the two end colors. So if you wanted to work a 200-gram shawl, you can do 100 grams in gradient and then 100 grams in one solid color, and it gives this really beautiful effect that nobody else is doing anything similar to that. What's that? Yeah, at least nobody that I know of is doing that. They're the only company I've ever seen that offers that. And I've bought a couple of sets from them now. But most notably for me is I showed this last week, but this is the shawl I made for my wedding. And yeah, we show it every week. I like this shawl. So you can see here, the gradient was about this much of the yarn, and then this is the 100 grams of the end color. And so it's damson to gold. Damson is this blue color, and then a whole skein of damson. So anyway, those are probably my two favorite yarn companies. They're ones that I will travel to see. Like if I'm looking at a yarn show and I'm like, I don't know, maybe we'll go, it might be interesting, and then I see either of those two yarn companies, it persuades me more so to be like, I think we're gonna go because I haven't seen them in a while. So and then obviously there's tons of other yarn companies, but that's definitely the ones I will travel for. So Isaiah's asking, what's my favorite yarn cake? I guess if we're just talking about yarns that are sold caked already, my favorite is probably Premier DK Colors. If we're talking about, there's a number of different things people mean when they say cakes. So I actually think that the Lion Brand Mandala yarns are a very nice caked yarn that is a decent attempt at a gradient. But like they actually have a couple of stitches in there where the color transitions. And I think I did a review on Mandala Baby, which was also a very nice yarn to work with. No, it was Mandala Baby, and it had like all sorts of like speckles in it, which it was unclear on whether the speckles were intentional or not. But I liked the way they looked. There's actually, I think there's a review on that yarn, and then there's also a video of me blocking that, where you can really see the speckles in there. Fiber Optic Yarns is out of Ohio. Yes. Getting a link to them. Oh, okay. And Twisted Fiber Arts is somewhere out of the Midwest, maybe Michigan. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, as far as cakes go, it really just depends on what you want and what pattern you're going to be working with. If you're looking for a gradient where you need a slower color change, probably the absolute best yarn at doing a slow color change is Lion Brand Shawl and a Cake. They're, at least in the big box brands. If you get into indie gradients, there are tons of companies very good at it. Both of the two that I just mentioned and that we posted links to, Fiber Optic and Twisted Fiber Arts, are known for their gradients. Yeah, Twisted Fiber Arts is sold in a cake. But if you're talking big box brands that sell yarn caked up already, this is Shawl in a Cake. I don't remember the name of the colorway, but you can see here, this is one of the nicest gradient style yarns. Obviously it does some color repeat, so it's not a perfect gradient, but what you can see here is it goes from this really like intense blue to a blue purple, into a pinky purple, into pink. And then it undoes those color changes. So pinky purple, purple, purpley blue, blue, and then really bright, like a teal. And then this is a weird like cotton candy transition where it's both pink and blue, and then back into pink, which fades into an intense magenta. And so those color changes just keep repeating over and over again. There are balls of Shawl in a Cake that have less color changes. I think this one has a bunch more colors than some of them do. Some of them just go back and forth between like blue and white. But yeah, so these so it's the best gradient. My husband's saying, is this your favorite big box cake? And this is the best gradient. That's just a regular old yarn. I guess there's also, what is the name of that yarn? Rainbow. It's a Wrap Rainbow and It's a Wrap Sprinkles are really nice gradients. They're a little bit weird to work with because they're a stranded cotton yarn, which means it's 4 strands of yarn held together, but not twisted. So you have to remember to keep like all of the strands together, which can be a little bit tricky to work with, but not difficult, just something that you have to kind of watch for. Those make a very nice gradient effect as well. But as far as just yarns sold in a cake, my favorite is probably DK Colors. If we're talking at big box stores, it's a really, I think I've mentioned this a lot of times, but there are uses for different types of yarn. Like there are things that I specifically would go to a big box store and choose a yarn there over something that I would buy at a yarn store or at a yarn show. I make, shawls and stuff for myself and stuff for gifts for people I know that will care for them out of things from yarn shows. And I make baby blankets and kids gifts out of things from big box stores just because I know that they're going to get beat up and handled more roughly. And there's no reason to really spend the extra money on something that won't be cared for in the same way. So I definitely have favorites depending on what the application is. So Roving J Hook just joined and asked what cake it was. I think we had the shawl and a cake out at that time. This is just a example of what I think is one of the best gradients in a regular yarn from a big box store. So this is a pretty standard, just like, basically there are two good gradients that I can think of from big box stores. One is this yarn. The other is It's a Wrap Rainbow, which is a very different style yarn. Because it's a stranded cotton yarn, like I was saying. So, if you're going to work with shawl and a ball or shawl and a cake, they're the same yarn, by the way. They're just one is sold in a cake and one isn't. I think they started selling it in the cakes because the balls are notoriously terrible at tangling up really badly. This is not a super beginner friendly yarn. It's very, very difficult to pull your stitches out. And it has just an absolute ton of halo. And so it's pretty difficult to see your stitches and figure out like where you're putting your hook and what you're doing. So, I'm reasonably happy with how this turned out. It's got a bit more halo than I like. But like I said, the gradient was very impressive. As far as how well they did for a big box store. So yeah, you can see the halo and like just the fuzz on all the stitches here. You can kind of see that there's like a hair layer. Like I can feel all the hairs even if I'm pretty far away from the shawl. So all right, let's see if I catch up here. I bought Takacha cakes, and I'm trying to match a cake yarn that is worsted with wool. Any ideas? Just any cake yarn that is worsted with wool. The only one that I can think of off the top, Lion Brand Mandala Wool Ease, or maybe there's two separate yarns. There's Mandala with wool and Wool Ease Stripes, I think. Both have wool in them. As far as I can tell, they're the same yarn, but they just are selling them under two different labels. I'm not super clear what Lion Brand is doing there. But I've seen both, and they're very clearly the same yarn. They have the same yardage, same fiber content, same everything. That's the only one that springs to mind. As far as a big box store, those you can get at Walmart. I'm trying to think who else has wool in a caked yarn. The only other one that's coming to mind is the Plymouth Hot Cakes, which is a local yarn store brand, and I don't remember if that has wool in it or not, but I feel like it did. Yeah, I mean that's my husband was saying it's a yarn store brand. I think most people know that when I say local yarn store, I mean any local yarn store local to you is fine, not just a local one to me. But the term is generally used as LYS, which is that style of store.
Hotcakes is 25% wool.
Yeah, hotcakes is 25% wool. Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused as to what you're trying to do exactly. Are you just trying to have a second yarn to work with, or are you trying to actually match the colors? Because that would probably be quite a bit more difficult. But if you're just aiming for a yarn that you can work like back and forth with and work them next to each other or something like that, then that makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, I think those are the only ones that I can think of off the top of my head, unless you go to, you know, like hand dyed yarns where you can get 100% wool. I'm almost sure that Hobby Lobby probably has something. Hobby Lobby seems to have a weird amount of like everything. They seem to just be competing left and right with all sorts of colors. So, okay, the colors are bright. You're going to separate them and use another cake. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, you can do that. You could do that with another cake yarn, or you could potentially just add a solid in and basically make stripes. I don't know, depending on what the pattern looks like. Okay, so you're just looking to tone them down a bit. Okay. All right, cool. So she's just saying that they're normally 17 and you got them for 3. That's an excellent deal. So, yeah, you could I guess the other thing that you could do is you could hold 2 strands together and you could hold it with a solid gray, which would sort of just act to mute the entire thing. You'd have to just work up a little swatch and see how it goes, but you could hold it together with something that basically just mutes the color. That might work. And holding 2 together is not very difficult. You just would then end up working a pattern like it's a bulky or a super bulky yarn, depending on how heavy the yarns were that you use. All right. So yeah, it's worth trying a swatch on that and just seeing if a solid held together with it gets you the effect that you need. The other advantage there is that you don't have to match the weight. If you work back and forth between 2 different cakes, they need to be pretty similar so that your gauge isn't changing back and forth. If you hold 2 together, you can mix and match a DK or a sport weight or worsted weight. Like you can hold 1 worsted and 1 sport next to each other with just like a little bit of extra weight there. And it doesn't matter because you would just hold 2 together the whole way through. So, you've got a little bit more flexibility there. So, all right. I could pull my computer back out and show this Dottie Cowl real quick, just so I mean, just like bring up the pattern. I don't know. I don't have any real reason to, but there are a couple other like cool colors of it that I think really look neat. Gotta find it real quick. There it is. So this is the color. So it was supposed to be the Machita and the Melbrigo yarn sock. I guess I couldn't remember the name because it was just called sock. But you can see there's the 2 worked against each other. I'm using a different color than they used. I've got I guess I can tell you what the colorway is. It is Viola is the color that I'm using. Viola and Ambassador are the 2 colors that I've got. But there are really some cool projects in here This one in particular, I really like the teal going on in here. There was a teal and gold one towards the bottom of this page. I might do something like this too. I haven't figured out if I am, but this little cuff here is kind of an interesting little detail on there that I thought looked really nice on this cowl in particular. This is the one that I was going to show. I really like the blue and gold there. I thought it looked really cool. So, I don't know. I think this is a really fun pattern, and I think it's turning out really cool. I don't really know if anyone else thinks the same, but, yeah. So, for those of you who've joined in, after we started, if you got questions about yarn or crochet or things that I can answer, please go ahead and throw those in the live chat and we'll talk about them. If you're joining after the stream is already over, you're certainly welcome to put your any questions or comments down in the comment section. But I don't really have a whole lot planned for tonight. It's mostly just questions and chatting. I don't know, because I haven't been really able to do much yarn shopping. Oh, you know what? I got a Leither box yesterday. Yeah, it's upstairs, just on the landing, like right after you go up the short stairs. So, it's in like a white bag. So I do have one other thing to show. I totally forgot about that. I brought it in and thought I'll open it on stream, and then forgot about it completely. So we'll open that up too, just for something fun to do. Norma's asking, she crochets very tight. How can I loosen my tension? I don't know if I have any great tips. Really, I find the way that I crochet that most of my tension comes from the hand that I'm like, this is going to sound ridiculous, but my tension comes from like where I'm really holding onto the yarn. And if you can identify where it is that you're actually getting your tension from. So, for example, when I'm crocheting, I hold my yarn under all three of my fingers. My husband went upstairs to find the box, and so when we switch, I'll switch views here. But I hold my yarn under all three fingers. If my tension was too high, I could take my yarn around and bring it under less fingers. So if you can identify where your tension is coming from and then adjust accordingly. So when I'm tensioning my yarn, let's see if I can find a stitch to pick up here. Where are we at here? There we are. Doesn't sound like finding my box is going well. So again, I tension with these three fingers. If I needed to loosen my tension, I probably would pull it off of this finger because this is where I'm getting most of my tension and just sort of disrupt that. No luck? Oh, good. What's that? Yeah, so she did mention that, she wasn't able to, her box supplier is closed for coronavirus. So she wasn't able to get the normal boxes, and then it was bagged, but we removed that and wiped down the packaging for, virus reasons. So it's not the same pretty box that it normally is, but it is still packaged very nicely inside. We were talking about tension real quick, though, so if you could switch views real quick.
What do you want me to show?
My hand, and in particular, these fingers. Copper Pot's suggestion is also very good. If you go up a hook size, sometimes that will fix your gauge problems and how well things are draping. It might not actually help you reduce your tension, but it just won't matter. So going up a hook size will correct the problem, but not the symptom, or the other way around. It'll correct the symptom, but not the cause. So, so I tension, actually it looks like my tension comes from my pinky here. So if I needed to relax my tension, I would find the spot where most of my tension is coming from and try and reroute my yarn. So in this case, this would reduce my tension quite a bit if I wasn't holding it with this last bit here. So just adjusting how things are running through your hands, or trying to find the cause of what's actually giving you tension. I know that sounds a little crazy or sounds like a little simplistic, but your hand is doing the tensioning if you're holding your yarn, because you can't just crochet without any tension, because there's nothing like holds things really on your hook. I mean, you can, but it's pretty difficult. Like to just pick up stitches without any tension on there. Things are kind of flopping all around. So you need some tension, but trying to identify where it's coming from and focusing on relaxing that mechanism. It's difficult to do because you get used to crocheting one particular way, and it's pretty hard to figure out how to fix that. I actually crochet with very little tension most of the time. But you can see my yarn just kind of flows across my finger, and most of my tension is coming from back here, through here. I do find, though, that if I crochet for really long periods of time, that my pinky finger starts to cramp up, especially if I'm doing something like amigurumi or working with cotton. Like if I'm using crochet cotton and making doilies or something like that, because they have to be done with lots of teeny tiny, very tight stitches, my hands do cramp quite a bit. So loosening up your tension should also alleviate if you're having any like arthritis or cramping in your hands or anything like that. It should help with things like that as well. Just because anytime you can sort of relax your hands is better than keeping them balled up. So, all right, back to the Leither Co. box. I'm gonna open this guy up here. All right. Ooh. It's a really pretty spring color. It's called April Showers. It's a sport weight yarn. And you can see it's kind of like gray and then all sorts of Easter pastel type of colors. So you got some gray in here, but there's also sort of a sea foam. There's this really pretty blue in here. Sort of a kind of muted, like rubber ducky yellow. And then like a nice pink mixed in. So it's a very pretty color. Let's see what kind of hook we've got this time. It is an E hook, which is a 3.5 millimeter. It's got a really nice handle. I thought I already had an E hook, but I guess I could be wrong. Maybe it's an F hook. It might be a 3.75 rather than a 3.5. But it's got this really cool, like, stopper looking end to it. And I think it will probably not quite stand up on its own. It is slightly rounded on the bottom, so I'm not totally surprised, but it kind of looks like it should stand on its own. But it's pretty cool. These are all hand-turned hooks that come with the subscription box, turned by the owner's husband, or I guess the husband out of the pair, since they're probably both owners of the company. It also has this little rainbow cloud charm with it. There's two little puffy clouds and a rainbow between them. The rainbow is primarily blue, which is not much of a rainbow, but still very cute. And then there's a little pattern booklet, and in the booklet there should be a picture of what this makes, and it is a shawl, which I'm going to try and not show the whole pattern of. Pretty bad at that. So there's a picture of the shawl that it works up into. It looks very yellow and blue, but I can see the patches of pink and green in here. The yellow and blue must just be very prominent, either in the pattern or they just picked up in the photography a little bit more. But I can see the other colors mixed in there. It also looks like, so, this subscription box also, so I get the Merino Deluxe box, which contains the yarn, the hook, a gift, and the pattern. There's also a cotton box that may contain, it contains some of the same things, but the yarn is different. It's 100% cotton yarn. And sometimes that means that there's a different project. And so in this case, it's like a little makeup bag here. I think I also get the pattern. Yeah, I get the pattern for the little makeup bag, but I obviously did not get the yarn for that. So I got both patterns out of this. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It looks like there's a whole different set of little stitch markers, so everyone got a slightly different one. They all look April shower themed. Looks like there's a umbrella and a lightning bolt and a cloud and things like that. There's also hooks in the set. I get the natural, like, wooden looking ones because that's the style I prefer, but there are also like multicolored ones. So I've shown these before. I don't, this is not a sponsored thing. It's just something that I like to get in the mail. And I think it's fun to unbox on stream. Just something fun to show off. The name of this subscription, somebody's asked, Roving J Hooks asking, name of the subscription is Leither Co. It's a crochet box, or a subscription box, which I think is really cool. The hooks that they make are based with clover hooks, so I think they probably just remove the outer cover and use the hook portion and place it in their hand-turned handles, but I'm not positive on that. But they are definitely clover hooks. And I think the price is somewhere in the $40 range. But there are a bunch of different box options. So you can get just the hook, you can get just the yarn, you can get just the pattern. You can get merino or cotton. So there's a lot of different options, but the box that I get, I think, is the wool deluxe box, and I think it's in the $40-ish range. And I think you can sign up for like a month or 3 months, or you can just have a recurring subscription.
So there's a merino yarn box.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the Clover Deluxe box?
It's the Clover Deluxe box.
That one's a clover hook in like a regular clover hook.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's the Merino Deluxe box then.
It must be the natural deluxe box.
Okay. I get the
natural deluxe box is $45.
Okay, so it's the natural deluxe box, and it's $45, and then I think I pay a couple dollars for shipping. So it's probably, I think it used to be 40. I think it's now probably closer to like 47 or something like that. Roving J Hook is asking if the clover hooks are rounded or sharp. Yes. They're not the sharpest hooks that I've worked with. They are sharper than some. So here you can see, this is my regular Clover Amour hook. They are a very good hybrid hook. So pretty much regardless of what you are using now, the Clover is sort of a transition from any hook to this. That's not really a great way to say that, but they are a tapered, but they have a more inline throat than a normal tapered hook. They're not super pointy, but they're not like the roundest blah hook ever. They're just really well designed. We come back to clover hooks probably every other live stream. What's that? The Clover Amour is the one that I like. The Clover Soft Touches are also nice. I just like the Amours better. I think that they're slightly more slippery, but I think that's probably just my perception. But the thing that sells the Clover hooks is this finish on the hook that is just so slippery and so just so nice to use. I've mentioned this before, but there's a website called Camel 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 that will watch Amazon for you. And if you set it up, you can have it send you an email when something on Amazon gets to a particular price. So every time the Clover hooks get under $25, it sends me an email. And every time they get under $25, I buy a set. Because you lose a hook here, or you give one to somebody, or whatever happens. Or there's a wall of project bags over there, and there's probably a hook in most of the bags. And so I just sort of have to replace them every now and again. But every time they get cheap enough, I just buy another set of them. So I think the set retails for $75. If you keep an eye on Joann Fabric, occasionally they will run a 60% off coupon. It's pretty rare, but they do run them. The problem is that the 60% off coupon only works on non-sale items. So you have to catch a coupon on a day when they don't have the hooks on sale, which is not all that often. Or you have to catch a really good hook sale. So occasionally I think hooks go on sale for like 40 or 50%. And then if they happen to have a like 20% off your total purchase coupon, you can usually get a really nice deal like in a store. But otherwise, they're pretty regularly about $35, which is like half price on Amazon. And like I said, I just watch for them to go below 25, and that's for a 10 hook set. So that's the B hook through the J hook. Including a 7 hook, which is a 4.5 millimeter, which is a size that a lot of companies skip. But so it's a 10 hook set for $25. It makes them $250 a piece. It's pretty reasonable in my opinion. But like I said, these are absolutely my favorite. And then the Leither Co box. Put the just slightly out of my reach. The Leither Co box uses the same hooks, but puts them in a hand-turned handle. So you can see that these have the same finish and same look to them. And one of the only things that I maybe would critique on this is because they have to place them in the wood, the throat here is, or the shaft portion here is just a little bit short. So if I was working a bunch of stitches, like a big puff stitch, I might struggle just a little bit to get all of my loops on the hook. But other than that, it's not really a major concern. I very rarely use the whole length here to crochet. And realistically, I stay choked up pretty hard on my hook normally. So that really puts it in the right range here. So it really would only matter if you were trying to work a lot of stitches on here. So
they are more hooks on their website?
Yeah.
Like specifically?
Yeah, so my husband's saying they are Amour hooks on the website. The Clover Soft Touches are gold. So I did know they were Amour hooks. but yes, they are from Clover and Moore hooks. So I don't know. I've been pretty happy with them. The hand-turned handles take a little bit of time getting used to, versus these pretty fine handles. These are actually more comfortable because, again, I have a tendency to grip too tight with my pinky. So you can see on this hook, and in particular, an E-hook is my favorite hook. We're switching cameras. An E-hook is my favorite, and you can see, like, even right here, my pinky is getting a little bit red just holding this pretty snug. On this hook, it has to stay a little bit more open because the width of this is much fatter. But it does take me some getting used to. I do really like this handle the more I'm just handling it here. My middle finger sits really nice in the groove that they've got turned in there. Because a lot of times I rock my hook as I'm making my stitches. And so my middle finger is doing a really nice job sitting there and able to do that. So I think that this will work very well for me. But I'm going to give it a try because I'm working on that cowl right now with that exact hook. Let's see. What is my experience with the weight of the Leither box? Worsted Woman, Knit Crate keeps sending me skinny yarn, looking for a subscription box with thicker yarns. So one of the interesting things about the Leither box is because she's trying to get all 10 hooks for, how do I want to say this?
The hook is for the project.
Right. So you're sent a whole project. So you get a yarn and a hook and a pattern. And everything to do the project. And she's trying to go through each of the hooks in the set of 10 with each box. So you're going to get a fine yarn and a fat yarn and kind of everything in between because they're trying to use all 10 hooks and the yarns are paired with the hooks. So if you subscribe for 10 months, you'll eventually get all of the hooks out of the set. Which means you'll also get a wide range of yarn. So I feel like the yarns tend towards a DK weight on the average. I've gotten a few fingering weight yarns. I've gotten a few worsted weight yarns. I've gotten, I think, a couple of super bulky yarns. Really, really fat yarns. Yeah, they're all sitting over here. We can open some boxes. They look a little ridiculous, but I will drag them all out.
You don't have to get all of them.
Yeah, but we can just open some, for example. Most of them we've ripped off for opening on live streams, but I'll keep them down. All right, so this one's fingering weight. This was from, usually it says what month they are. This was from last May. This was one of the first ones I got. This one is a super bulky yarn. Yep, this one's fingering weight. This is an example of the cotton before they switched. I think the cotton is roughly fingering weight. So that was a little bit of a different box before she started offering the cotton as an exclusive box. This one's a regular bulky, not super bulky. I know, it's just kind of fun to pull them out and see what's in here. This is another fingering weight. So there's a lot of variety, but definitely not just one type of weight. I know a lot of people don't like fingering weight yarns. They're kind of my favorite. So I don't mind getting tons of fingering weight yarn. Probably got all these mixed up now. I should dig all the stitch markers out and use them rather than leave them all in those boxes, because I do like the little dangly stitch markers. What's that? Okay. Yeah. I think this was this one. Sorry, I'm boxing all these guys back up here. But yeah, there's quite a variety of patterns. I also really appreciate that she does seem to take quite a bit of effort in making a variety of patterns. So it's not all just shawls and cowls and hats. There's been a lot of interesting projects. So there's like a pillow cover, I think some earrings at one point. And those even included, if I remember correctly, they included the little pieces, I guess what you'd call jewelry findings, to make the dangly earrings. There was a amigurumi, or not really an amigurumi, but like a lovey, and she included the safety eyes. It was like a little alpaca, and it included the safety eyes and the stuffing. So yeah, there's a lot of variety. I think there was a table runner in there. A lot of interesting different projects. So yes, it is. Yeah, it is exclusively a crochet box. So, Knit Crate offers both a knitting box and a yarn box with no pattern. That's slightly cheaper, but they, as far as I remember, don't offer any crochet patterns. Right, Knit Crate doesn't offer crochet, and Leither Co doesn't offer knit. Yeah. Yeah, same as Knit Crate, you can just get a box of yarn. If you're primarily a knitter or a weaver or something, you can just get yarn on a subscription basis. And again, I'm not affiliated. It's just one that I came across and have really liked getting. And so there are other options. But yeah, there's lots of options in boxes like that. So this is just one that I happen to like because it was a crochet one, and because it had those hand-turned hooks were really interesting to me. The Clover Amour is a relatively recent bonus for me. They were just hand-turned hooks, but now that they have the Clover hook base, they're really, really appealing to me. Let's see. Roving J Hook says that they don't have the patience for 1 and 2, like to see progress. I can understand that. For example, something like this cowl. I'm like 40 or 50 grams into this cowl and maybe like a third of the way done. And it's working up slow, but there is something to be said, at least in my opinion, for the detail that a fine yarn lets you have. I think it just looks so elegant, I guess is probably the best I can come up with. But I 100% understand where you're coming from. And when I do make something out of a bulky weight yarn and it works up so fast, and then I switch back to working with like a fingering weight yarn, it's like torture, because it's like every stitch just takes forever to make up. It's also the reason that I very rarely do a 200-gram shawl. I can do 100 grams day in, day out. But when we go to 200 grams, it sort of feels like it's just dragging on forever and ever. So I was actually surprised that Moonwake shawl worked up really quickly for me. And for as solid as it is, I expected it to feel like torture. But it worked up very fast for me. So I 100% get where you're coming from there. Lucy asked if I knit too. I do not. I can just about cast on and knit about 3 rows, and then I mess something up or drop a stitch and have to pull it all back out because I don't know how to fix it. And that's about all the knitting I know how to do. I don't even know how to purl. But yeah, I've tried to learn, and I don't think it's that I can't learn or that I don't want to learn. It's just that I'm already really good at crocheting, and there's so many things that I want to crochet that I don't want to set aside my crochet for long enough to learn to knit properly, and really get good at it. So I can just keep, in the time that it would take me to get half decent, I could make another 50 shawls in crochet. So I guess I just haven't devoted the time. I also have started weaving. And so that's kind of a different fiber art, but that's not crochet. I've really only done the one scarf, and I have yet to warp another project yet. I'm kind of, because I only have one loom, the way I crochet is I'll start a project, and if I get bored with it, I'll just start a new project, and maybe I'll come back to it, and maybe it'll sit on the wall for, 3 or 4 years. But with a weaving loom, you can only have one project going, without a massive mess in taking it off. You can actually take it off, but looks miserable. But I guess the problem is that once you commit your loom to a project, you have to finish it before you can start something different. So I'm hesitant to pick a new project because I keep going back and forth on what I want to do next. So, and it's quite a bit of effort to warp it. So I haven't committed the time to rewarping it a second time. Copperpot's asking if I've tried crochet alongs. I've a couple times, but discovered I'm a go at your own pace type. I've had similar problems with crochet alongs. I've considered running them on the channel and talked about running them. I think that I probably have a similar issue, is that sometimes I will take 6 months to do something that I absolutely could have done in a weekend. And sometimes I will do 6 weeks of crocheting in 48 hours. And it just really depends on what's going on in my life. And, if we're traveling a whole bunch, maybe I'll get more done because I'm just sitting. Or, maybe I'll work the weekend and not really get much time to crochet. So it's tough because I just feel like I don't really want crochet to have pressure behind it to try and match up with what other people are doing, or trying to keep on pace. I don't know, it seems like an added element of stress a little bit. Or especially with mystery crochet alongs, if I work the 5 or 6 rows that they release, well, now I want to just keep working on it, and I don't want to have to set it down and work on something else while I wait for the next set of clues to come out. So it's a little bit, I get where you're coming from there. I have done a few, and they usually are pretty fun just because you get to see everybody's work, all on the same project, all at the same time. But yeah, I don't do that many of them. Let's see. Lucy says, she's a friend that makes, so many nice things with knitting, but she's definitely a crocheter. I actually have a friend, a person that I worked with, and she is an amazing knitter. And has really upped her knitting skills since we worked together. And she did a little bit of crochet, and I would do a little bit of crochet at lunch and stuff, and we'd talk about it, and got her kind of into hand-dyed yarns. And she's really done some amazing stuff recently, and it makes me very jealous. I really want to be able to knit like that. And then I go to learn to knit again and remember that I'm absolutely a crocheter. So she's really done some beautiful work recently, and and just some very pretty sweaters and stuff. How did I learn to crochet? I think I've mentioned this in the past. I grew up, my grandma was a crocheter and tried to learn a couple of times, and I tried learning left-handed for a while because I am left-handed, and that was a failure. And I don't know, I guess 7 or 8 years ago, I just decided I wanted to try it again. Yeah, I think I was probably out of work, and my husband may have suggested that I try it. I don't actually remember what prompted picking up a crochet hook again. I do vaguely remember that at the time Frozen had just come out, and it was like wildly way more popular than Disney had expected. And there were a couple of Frozen amigurumi that I really wanted to try. And so I do vaguely remember that being like a really early on project in what I was doing. But yeah, I don't, as far as how I learned, I just kind of powered through a few videos, and I don't honestly even remember what videos were the ones that like I actually learned off of. But once you get through tension and figure out exactly how to tension, the rest comes pretty easily. At least it came pretty easily to me. The biggest thing I remember struggling just absolutely terribly with was making a magic circle. So when you start amigurumi, you want a circle that you can pull tight and close the gap in the top. And that took me a really, really long time to figure out how to do. And I did finally figure it out, and I don't know why it was so difficult, because it's really not that hard to do, but it did take me a really long time. There is a Tumblr out there called crochetgifts.tumblr.com, I think. It's crochet-gifts.tumblr.com. And it's a really, really interesting way of teaching crochet, because they're gifts, so they're looping constantly. And so you don't have to set anything down to rewatch the motion. And they've broken it down into these really nice, like, little steps that just loop constantly. And so I did use that quite a bit in learning to crochet. I did use some YouTube videos. And I did put a lot of effort really early on into reading patterns, both charts and written patterns, so that I can really make whatever I want. I found patterns to be fun, kind of like a little fun challenge that you had to sort of decode them. I know that can be very overwhelming learning early on. But they were kind of a little bit of a translation that you had to do. So, I'm not sure that helps. I have kind of a memory like a sieve, so I don't actually really remember how I learned to crochet. But one point I didn't, and then I did, and now I crochet a lot. That doesn't really help at all. Lucy says she has a lot of projects all at once too, and doesn't feel bad. Committed to a temperature blanket this year too. Let's see what else I find knitting somewhat difficult. Knitting is just, it's a very different motion that you need to make, and I don't think I've totally figured out the muscle memory for it. And I feel like it works up a lot slower. Like each stitch takes longer, And since I primarily work with fingering weight yarns when I'm working on shawls and stuff, that they felt like they were even slower than working the same style shawl out of crochet. And I think, like I said, it's just that I really can just fly through crochet when I need to or when I want to, and so the learning curve on learning to knit is just steeper than that I want to commit to, because I can just make a bunch of crochet shawls in the meantime. So we have come across quite a bit of really, really beautiful knit shawls, though, at yarn shows and things like that. And probably one of these days I will actually take the time and learn to knit properly and knit some shawls. But Robin J. Hook saying fingering weight and knit would take forever. Yeah, it definitely would. The friend of mine who's been working up sweaters, they've all been fingering weight yarn, and just the detail on them is really, really stunning, but the time that she's got to put into making them is pretty insane. So Maya says hello from Puerto Rico. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, it's a little bit towards the end of the stream, but either way, thank you for joining us. And as soon as the replay is available, you can catch up on what you missed. Yeah. So I'm glad I remembered that Leither Co box was upstairs. I totally forgot about that. So, I don't know if anyone else has other crochet or yarn questions, but feel free to throw those in the live chat. Have I ever done the tiny little crochet animals? I've done some pretty little ones. I think the littlest one I did was a lobster. It was about this big, but not the teeniest, tiniest ones that are done with like an actual sewing needle and sewing thread. Well, I guess not a sewing needle, but a steel crochet hook and sewing thread. I think the finest stuff that I've ever done is really doilies. So with really fine crochet thread and teeny tiny stitches. Probably the hardest thing with teeny tiny yarn I did was the repair on that doily. It was a lot of fun, but it was interesting. So, I'm not understanding the next comment.
I assume Smells Like Yarn is maybe a YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. It's another channel or something like that, maybe. Skinny Yarn and Knitting. Yeah, okay, Ross at Smells Like Yarn. Okay, that makes much more sense. I'm with yeah, I'm not familiar with Smells Like Yarn, but yeah, a lot of the people at my knitting and crochet night, like locally, use fingering weight yarn and knit, and it works up slow, but they really do make beautiful projects. So it's possibly worth the time. Do I do mosaic crochet? I guess technically this cowl is sort of a mosaic type of crochet. Really, mosaic crochet ends up just being working stitches in front and behind each other so that they overlap on top of each other. And so this is sort of a type of very, very basic mosaic crochet. I guess the only other thing that I've really done in mosaic is those little squares that I've been working up the terrazzo squares, Afghan squares. Those I believe are also a mosaics type of crochet. But I have not done much in that. I do really like color work. I think it's a lot of fun, but yeah, I have not done tons in mosaic crochet. Roving J Hook, not a question, but tuned in a few weeks ago, ordered a project bag from Celestial Strings and it's beautiful. Thanks. Okay, for talking about her. Yeah, so Roving J Hook is mentioning the Celestial Strings project bags that I showed off a few weeks ago. I think I've got one right here. I can sew, not like amazingly, but I do pretty well. And I've made plenty of my own project bags, but Celestial Strings gets these really, really awesome patterns in on limited edition run fabrics. And she does a really nice job on making project bags. And so I continue to buy them from her. And I think that they're, at least for me, they're worth the money. A lot of times she'll run a deal where you get a project bag and a matched skein of yarn. So like I have a, is it right here? I have a How to Train Your Dragon project bag, and then it came with 2 skeins of yarn that looked just like the project bag. They were in the same colors. Yeah, but it's nice to hear that feedback that you liked the suggestion there. So I'm glad that the project bag worked out and that it wasn't a bad recommendation, but I've been very happy with the project bags. So I've got both the drawstring style, and I really like this like Japanese knot style bag where you have 2 mismatched handle lengths and you put this one through that one. They're really nice for crochet because what you end up with is this like little gap here that allows you access. But what you can do is hang it from a doorknob or from like the armrest in the car or whatever, and it sort of acts as a yarn bowl temporarily. So if you you can also like kind of sort of half turn this out, but it doesn't work as well. But you can just basically leave it closed all the time and just pull yarn like you're working from a yarn bowl. So I've been happy with both styles. Lucy asked if my husband crochets too. He does not. He does do a little bit with the circular knitter. But he does not crochet. I think he can chain, but that's about it. He's done some stitches on projects that I've worked on, like you've made a couple double crochets or something, but he's not a crocheter. He does a lot of yarn shopping though with me, sometimes without me. But yeah, we've got a couple of like circular knitting machines, the plastic kind with the crank. And so he's done some of that. Here's a hat, for example, that was made on the circular knitting machine that he made. So, yeah, has a little bit of interest in fiber arts and does that, but is not a crocheter. So, Maya says she's lost her Crojo and is asking what I recommend. What I normally recommend when people say that they've lost like their sort of their interest in crocheting is to spend a little time. I usually spend time on Ravelry and just find a project that you want to do. It might be one that you put in your library years ago and you thought, oh, I'll do that. And, there's not really any reason to do it. Maybe it's a very elaborate shawl or, just something that if you normally make hats and you just are sick of hats, or you normally make baby blankets and you're just sick of baby blankets, just find something totally different that really speaks to you, and do that. Yeah, what my husband was saying is browse the top patterns. And actually what I really like to do is browse the hot right now. Just because those are currently popular, even if they're not like long term the most popular on there. A lot of times when I go to the most popular, I feel like the same like 11 patterns have been the most popular patterns in crochet for like 3 years. They very rarely change, but the hot right now changes all the time. But yeah, you can use Ravelry to help you find different things. The other thing you can do is if you have a yarn like that you've got stashed away that you bought and is what I see a lot of people do is they'll buy hand-dyed yarn and they'll buy one skein. It's their first one and they don't want to use it because it feels, and I did the exact same thing. It feels like it's too fancy and that it won't be a good enough project. Just use it. Pick something that you like and just use it because it's like, it might make you happy just sitting on a shelf, but at least for me, it made me much happier to have the shawl, that I made out of the yarn. And so my recommendation is just take the plunge and use the good yarn. If you've got something that you've been setting aside for the best project, just use that. That'll get you really back, like, excited about it. Yeah. Yeah, what my husband was saying is maybe if you have the ability to do so, like, splurge a little bit and buy a fancier yarn. And that doesn't have to be a $25 or $30 ball of yarn. Going into a local yarn store at like just a little yarn shop and finding a $10 ball that's a fiber that you don't normally work with. So if you primarily work with acrylic, maybe find 100% wool or 100% cotton or an alpaca blend or something interesting that just gets you excited. But do something different is my suggestion. Don't try and force yourself into doing the same thing because you feel like you need to. I Bring It says yarn companies do lookbooks, also Red Heart Premiere. So I think these are like pattern books that you can kind of like flip through is what the one that's coming to mind that like does the very notable lookbook is Sheep's. That is it the company out of the Netherlands, the SCHEEPJ whatever. They do a magazine or a webzine or something every, I think it might actually cost money with patterns, but they do a really like inspiring book. That could be another option, is to buy a magazine or download a magazine. I find that Interweave is very expensive and sometimes the patterns are a little bit out there, but sometimes they just have like a really stunning pattern. Really have a really nice pattern in there that gets me excited about it. Kind of like Use the Good Dishes. Yeah, Use the Good Dishes. So yeah, don't sit on the good yarn. You might as well just use it on yourself. I have 7 skeins of Malbrigo that I'm afraid to use because it's so pretty and I don't want to put shame of mediocre project. I need to get over that. Yeah, it's a hard thing to get over. At the point at which you have 7 skeins, you're starting to hoard it, and I guarantee you that you're going to continue to buy more. So just use it. I had the same problem when I was buying like really fancy nail polish. I kept feeling like, oh, I don't really want to use it because if I use the bottle up, then it's gone. And it's like, I'm just going to buy more. I need to just use it. And now there's, dozens and dozens of bottles of nail polish that are all bad because I didn't use them. Luckily, yarn doesn't really go bad. Oh, yes. He's teasing me about saying you're starting to hoard it with my boxes and boxes and boxes of yarn. So what I was driving at there is it's not just the only skein you own, and you're clearly interested in it, so you're gonna keep buying it because that's what yarn people do, is just keep buying more yarn. And so just use it. You'll be really happy with whatever you make. And there will be defects, like you'll make mistakes and you'll see them, but like you'll be happy. And they really a project out of a very nice yarn makes a really nice gift. So if you've got somebody that's that will enjoy that, really making a nice finished thing goes a long way. So yeah, worst case scenario, there is the option of just pulling it all back out. Crochet pulls out really easily. You can just rip all your stitches back, and get your yarn back. So if it's totally not what you wanted or going completely the wrong way, you can just pull it all back out and start over. So there is always that option too, but I would say definitely just use it. Yeah, definitely calling me out with my totes of yarn. You know what? They don't eat and they don't require upkeep, so it's not like I've got pets or, I don't know, even like plants. I don't even have to care for it. It's just boxes of yarn. Mostly it just takes up space. So and it makes me happy to dig through my buckets of yarn. So the other thing is there's not really an easy way to get rid of it, because like I gotta work through it all. So yeah, since we're not able to go shopping, I actually have been pretty proud of myself. I've been working through yarns that I've had for a while, and obviously it's one skein at a time type of thing, but this particular Sun Valley Fibers Ambassador yarn I've had for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years sitting in a box. There's like 4 or 5 other skeins of the same stuff in different colors. There was a yarn store that went out of business by me, and I got a really incredible deal on a number of skeins of yarn. And so this is one that's just been sitting in there for a while, just sort of begging to be used. So I found a really good project for it. So I have been working through my stash just a little bit. Yeah, so the difference between a project done with a less expensive yarn and a luxury yarn is pretty pretty shocking. That's not to say that there aren't nice cheap yarns and that you can't make a nice project, but yeah, I do definitely use the good yarn for myself if I'm making something that I know is for myself. and I really just like the feel of wool. Like a nice merino wool is not the scratchy wool that you think of, or what a lot of people think of when they think of wool. And I've mentioned this before, and a couple of people have commented, like Lion Brand has Touch of Alpaca, and it's not great, because they use a I don't want to say a low grade of alpaca, but it not as nice as the nicest alpacas that you can get, alpaca yarn you can get. And so it really does make a difference if you can put out the money for a really nice fiber. But whatever you could do in your budget, but yeah, really, like this is a cashmere blend, and there's not much nicer than a really nice cashmere blend. So I just keep petting it. Yeah. So what my husband's saying is the alpaca that we got from Ice Yarns seemed like it was pretty decent. That did seem like a pretty good alpaca blend. I think it was just a blend. I don't think any of them were 100% alpaca, but that seemed pretty nice for a big box type of brand, or like a mass produced type of brand. The other alpaca that I have is from an alpaca show, where people were actually like spinning or having yarn spun from their alpacas. And you can't really get any better than buying it like from the person who raised the alpaca. You get the nicest quality, and really that wasn't all that expensive. Because there wasn't really much in the way of supply chain. They owned the alpaca, they sheared the alpaca, and then they had it spun, but like it was all theirs, and so it seemed like it was a little bit cheaper than if the alpaca farmer had to sell it to a vendor, who had to sell it to a spinner, who had to sell it to a store. You have layers of markup and overhead there, where these people will just sheared their alpacas and turned it into yarn. They probably marked it up a little bit so that they made some money off of it, but it still ended up being, I think, quite a bit cheaper than I expected. That was really odd that we just kind of stumbled into that alpaca show, and I wish it would come back. It moves around. It was the Alpaca National Show, and it's not something that I would like, follow around the country. I think they were in like Colorado last year or something, but it just so happened to come through Central Illinois, and I kind of wish it would come back. It was kind of a fun thing to do. So, yeah. So I think I'm probably going to wrap up for the evening. Oh, the video from the alpaca show is posted in the chat as well. It was kind of a fun little montage of what was going on there. But yeah, so I think I'm going to wrap up for the evening, and I hope to see you all next week. We stream at 8 o'clock-ish, give or take about 15 minutes, on Tuesday nights, and that's 8 o'clock Central Time. And if you have questions or comments or suggestions on topics, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Experiments in Crafting. You can send me direct messages or tag me in, in posts that you have, just whatever you want to share with me. And otherwise, I will see you all next week. Thank you for joining me. Have a good week. Bye.